All right, so welcome everybody to Sheffield Cemeteries, Exploring Our Past. Before I get started introducing our speakers tonight, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping and tell you about some of the things that we have that's coming up over the next few months. This Saturday, and then also next Saturday from 9 to 1, Paul O'Brien will be outside of the Old Stone store collecting non-perishables for the Sheffield Food Pantry. So if you're driving by, if you see the red bins and Paul wearing a turkey hat, stop on by, and anything that you could give is really appreciated. But for those who do give 10 items, we will give you a choice of a designer mask that's locally made, or Sheffield Land Trust spring bulbs. Then on December 11th, John Arthur Miller will be reading The Night Before Christmas. So although we're not having our monthly programs at Dewey Hall, we want to keep that tradition of the second Friday of every month to offer you some sort of programming, usually through Zoom. So this program will be live streamed on our website. Now to the big story. Some of you might have seen around town, we're going to be starting a new tradition this year called the Winter Wonderland. So the Winter Wonderland will basically be an enchanted forest of 20 trees that are sponsored and decorated by local businesses, organizations, and families. You know, you could come and stroll around and enjoy the lights. In addition to those trees, we're also going to decorate some of our historic buildings with many lights and different other holiday decorations. It's going to be COVID safe, so we ask that you wear a mask, but it's also viewable from the town hall parking lot. So for those of you who just prefer to drive by and look at it, you know, we definitely welcome you to do it that way. And that is going to be from December 12th to January 6th, and that's every evening from 4 to 7 p.m. Now on December 12th, which is the opening night, and then also the next Saturday, which is December 19th, we're going to have a little extra special festivities at the Winter Wonderland. We'll have fire pits, a socially distant Santa, we'll have music, and also that day, during those times, the Old Stone store will be open for the Festival of Holidays. So if you have any last minute Christmas shopping to do, we definitely hope that you might make your way over there. So if you are interested in sponsoring a tree, businesses, the cost of that is $150, and for individuals and organizations, the cost is $100. If you'd be interested, if there's a local organization that you might want to sponsor in their name, just get in touch with them. So we definitely recommend that. We're looking at this as a community event, and we want to have as many representations of all the different things in this town represented there. In addition to our sponsored trees, we're also going to be selling cut trees. They are 6 to 7 foot Fraser firs, and they are locally sourced. They come from Ioka Farms, not too far away in Hancock. And each of those trees are $60. You can pre-order them right now on our website, and they're going fast. So I do recommend that you pre-order in the next week or so, because I think we've probably got sold about half of them already. All right. So one last element of the Winter Wonderland is our remembrance tree. So this is going to be an extra big tree in the very center of our grounds. And on it, there will be ornaments that people write the names of people, you know, who are heroes in their lives or people that they've lost. So you can not only fill those out at the 2 Saturday events, but you can also do it online, and we'll fill it out for you and put the ornament on the tree for you. So I think that'll be a very special thing. All right, I'm going to get started introducing our 2 speakers today. All right, so James Miller is the archivist at the MDRC. I think many of you are familiar with the work that he does, but you know, if there's a question about history in this town, Jim is the one to go to. Charlotte Owens is the treasurer for the society. But in addition to that, she's a very, very prolific photographer and contributor to Find a Grave. And both of them have spent many, many years, you know, restoring gravestones at the various cemeteries around town, and also helping upkeep the grounds. So if there are any 2 people in the town who know about the cemeteries, it is the 2 of them. So Jim, we're going to get started with you. I know, I think Charlotte's having a little bit of technical difficulties, so we're going to bring her in as soon as she gets that sorted out. And as I had mentioned, if everybody could mute themselves and turn off their videos, I would appreciate it. And if you have any questions, just write them in the chat at any point, and I will ask Charlotte or Jim those questions. Right, so hold on one second. I'm just going to pull up the PowerPoint and we're going to get started. Just need 1 second, please. Okay, I apologize for this. I'll just be 1 more second. Okay, Jim, if you'd like to get started, jump right in.
Well, I would like to take a slight detour before we get into the Sheffield cemeteries to tell you that what you're going to see tonight is basically only the dust from the quarries, because the mother lode of the cemetery information that we have is not going to be presented. We have it in the Mark Dewey Research Center, and it includes virtually every cemetery within approximately 20 miles of Sheffield, Connecticut, New York, and of course, Berkshire County. I have been interested in cemeteries for some time. When you study local history, what you find is a mother lode of information that relates to family connections, death information, and actually social organization of a community, because you can tell from the location of a marker within the cemetery, and also from the size of the marker, something about the social ranking of the particular person in the community. So I'm ready to start if you would like. The next is a map of the Sheffield cemeteries, showing the Sheffield cemeteries. It's not terribly easy to read, but if you are interested in it, we can get a copy to you. The cemeteries that we're going to see tonight are going to be listed in alphabetical order, so they won't follow any kind of pattern on the map. Okay. The Barnard Cemetery is the oldest one in town, and I believe it's probably the one that's most often visited, because it's in a slow MPH zone, and the parking is very, very easy, and the markers are intriguing from their looks from the road. There are some famous people buried in this cemetery, or notable people. I think one of the most notable is Elizabeth Sedgwick. She is was the first wife of the 5th Speaker of the House of Representatives, and she's buried there with her newborn daughter having died in childbirth. And a second one is Dan Raymond. The society is located in his house on Main Street, just north of the Galata Mobile Station. You see it, I think you can, if you can see that picture under where I'm talking. I don't know what you people can see, so. And the cemeteries are, I consider an outdoor museum, and they contain some of the earliest records that you can find about Sheffield. And what you see there is the Barnard Cemetery. It's opposite, immediately opposite Root Lane. And I have to know if Charlotte is going to talk about the markers or.
Charlotte is here now. Charlotte? She might still be having some technical difficulties, so.
Okay, well, I can tell you that this is, if you can, it's, what I see is 3 of 4. It's a compound stone, and it contains the contains information about 4 Sackett children that died, I think, within 5 years of each other. I believe it's slate, although I'm not 100% sure. It's in fragile condition. We had it stabilized a few years ago by a professional who said that he's never seen a marker anywhere in his entire career that represented 4 people. So I believe it's, if not extremely rare, it's possibly unique. Okay.
All right, so this is just going to show you a little bit of what Find a Grave is. You know, and we figured if we were going to look somebody up, let's look up Dan Raymond. And Find a Grave is something that is, I apologize for that, is originally, I think Charlotte will tell a little bit more about it. I know that it is owned by Ancestry.com now, so there is a little bit of integration between the information that they have on Ancestry and Find a Grave. But even if you're trying to look up, you know, people in your own family, there are cemeteries from all across the country and also in Europe that can be searched through this really great database. Okay, Jim.
Okay, the Bartholomew burial ground is probably the least known in town. It's one of the tiniest. In fact, it might be the tiniest. It's not visible from Route 41, which would be the access to it. You cannot see it from Route 41. It's on private property, and it contains only Bartholomew family members. It's a very old burial ground, so old that some of the markers that are there are almost 100% engulfed by the shade trees that cover the cemetery, the burial ground. It's active, but limited to Bartholomew's, and as you can see, the last burial was there in 2005, 15 years ago. Okay. Brush Hill Cemetery is also one of the least visited because it's a very small ground. It's on the end of a dead end dirt road. The road is Brush Hill Road, and it's off of Home Road. It's also known as the Clark Cemetery. It's open to the, was open to the public once it was expanded, and includes now what's known as the Lesh Cemetery, which physically abuts it. So it's an interesting place to go to. It's a little bit difficult to see unless you know exactly where it is, but it's very close to the dirt road. The markers in that cemetery are neglected. Let's put it that way. The adjoining Lesh cemetery is very well laid out. It's a beautiful open field, and it is open to the public, even though it's a private cemetery, meaning it has its own board of directors and does its own maintenance. Whereas the Brush Hill is a town cemetery and is maintained by the town, maintained such as it is, meaning the grass is mowed. Okay.
So this is one of the oldest gravestones that is in the Brush Hill Cemetery. Very unusual name, Waitsil Adams Rainsford. It was a woman. She was a woman. And if you see her birth, the 1717, you know, she was probably one of the very first settlers who came here to Sheffield. If you can notice on the bottom, sometimes the people who are descendants of the people who are memorialized on Find a Grave, could do things like put flowers on or add photos of their own. A lot of the Find a Grave stones also do include inscriptions. And the inscriptions and the photographs are the work of people like Charlotte who are out there taking photographs. I think she said she had over 8,000 photographs that she took. So the people out there, they're really doing yeoman's work, collecting all this information so that, people who are looking at their genealogy are able to find this information.
Okay, Candy or Sage Cemetery. It's a very old burial ground, not visible from Route 41, which would give you access to it. It is not only not visible, but it's difficult to find unless you know almost exactly where you're going. It contains at least one Revolutionary grave. That's Zacchaeus Candy. And what's, I think, very significant for that cemetery is that it's surrounded by conservancy land, and so it will be preserved. It's interesting to note that you have to...
I hear him. I'm in.
Okay, I'm hanging up.
Hi, Charlotte.
Hey, I'm sorry. We just have some technical difficulties here.
It's interesting to note that in order to get into that cemetery, you have to climb a small stone wall. It's not that the stone wall was built and the land was filled in to make it a cemetery. What happened here is that the ground was excavated around the perimeter of the cemetery, and then the stone wall was built by members of the Candy and the Sage family. Okay, I think we're ready.
I just want to jump in here. If anybody has any questions, feel free to type it in the chat box and I'll ask it of them.
Okay, this is Charlotte Owens talking finally. You're looking at a Find a Grave screen. This is the memorial screen. Pardon? This is the memorial screen, and this is the screen for David Benton Sr., who is buried there at the Sage Candy burial ground. And I'll be talking more a little bit later about Find a Grave. That's just so that you can see that. So we can move on to the next screen.
Center Cemetery on Berkshire School Road is the most active cemetery in Sheffield. It's noted for its Barnard Mortuary Chapel, the stone building that is located practically on the road. It is a combination of burial ground and cemetery. The front section is burial ground. The burials there are haphazard, irregular, unpredictable. But just behind the chapel, it starts to organize itself into a well-planned, laid-out cemetery where there's access to every burial site by a roadway, and there are family plots. You see the inside of the chapel. They actually used to have services there. I had at one time an organ. The organ is no longer there, but it's set up with pews, a small speaker's rostrum, and it was built by Columbia University from New York City in honor of Mr. Barnard, who was president of Columbia at one time, and for whom Barnard College was named. He's buried in the basement of the church, and his wife, along with his wife Elizabeth. And at one time, the basement also held on a steel racking a place to hold deceased until the spring thaw would allow hand digging of the graves, which was done by hand until around 1900. An interesting story with that one is that there's a lady in there by the name of Cabus. She was the treasurer of the United States when she was visiting Sheffield in 1969. She was visiting her father's grave. She died while she was there of a heart attack, and she's now buried beside her father in the very cemetery where she died. Okay. This picture is from immediately behind the Barnard Chapel. It is another Bartholomew family site, and you can see that what I mean now by the difference between a burial ground and a cemetery. You see how orderly it is. The family owns that entire enclosed area, and of course only their family members can be buried there. It's accessible by a roadway, and it is in style a high Victorian because of the gate and the fact that it's enclosed that way, and it's orderly, and it follows the pattern of the cemetery movement that started in Europe and came to the United States, and was extremely well developed during the Victorian period. Okay.
I'll pick up on this one. This is an interesting tombstone, shall we say, that is in Center Cemetery, and it's in the back section of the cemetery where the new burials, most of them are being made. Now, I've noticed that in other cemeteries, people get quite exotic with some of the things that they do put up in the cemetery. And in this particular one, it really looks like the exhaust system off of his motorcycle. And it's very nicely done there. And I just thought I would include it just so that you can see what people are doing. Okay. Okay, next.
Okay.
Yes.
The Churchill Cemetery is on Salisbury Road, very close to Route 41. It is an inactive cemetery, contains some very wonderful markers that are enduring, enduring passive neglect. It's in fairly good shape.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting person, in my opinion, who's buried there is Ezekiel Savage, who was a stone cutter in Sheffield, who has many, many signed markers in the various burial grounds. And he's buried there with his, I think both his second and his third wife. So that's next, I think. Owens Street, and that's very easy to see from Owens Street, near where that family lives. It has some extraordinarily beautiful markers. It's fairly well maintained, but it's not. The markers are not clean. Some have come over. They've been placed up again. An interesting person buried there is George Keep, who was also a stone cutter from Sheffield. I think that's it for that one.
Jim, we have a question. So these personal or private burial grounds, who maintains them? Is it the family? Is it the town? Exactly how does that work?
Well, with a couple of exceptions, it's fairly clear cut. If a burial ground has a board of directors and is active, they maintain the cemetery, including the cutting. If there is no board of directors and it's what you would call a dormant burial ground, the town maintains it. But their definition of maintenance is mowing. That's the beginning of it, and that's the end of it. So I'm not sure about the Owens Cemetery. I don't know if the town does it or the Owens family does it. But it is a town-owned cemetery.
Okay, Huggins.
Okay, Huggins is, if you know where to look, you can see it when you're going up Home Road on the right-hand side. It's been neglected quite badly, and Betty Chapin, who was a colleague of mine and a volunteer and a student of cemeteries for many, many years before I came to town, said that she would go there frequently and not often notice that markers were being taken out and probably hauled away for people's private collections. I would imagine that that's probably true of many of the cemeteries in Sheffield. Of course, it's against the law right now to do that. I wouldn't want to get caught doing it.
Interesting in this cemetery is the tombstones of Ziba and Louisa Forrest. Now they're buried here, and they had a son, Oliver Forrest, and he died at a young age. Now he's buried in the woods over by the town line between Sheffield and New Marlborough, on the Stanton property. Part of it's Stanton and the Kelly property there. And then they also had another son, John. He lived to be a ripe old age, and he's in the Hartsville Cemetery. So that family is in various parts. Okay, Jim.
Ashley Falls, the old Ashley Falls Cemetery is, again, if you know exactly where to look, you can see it from old Route 7. But a better marker for that one is it's behind the Methodist Church in Ashley Falls. And I don't know who maintains this cemetery. It's passive neglect again. There are markers that are down. There are markers that need maintenance, repair, and cleaning. It's an inactive cemetery, but it's the first cemetery in Sheffield. I don't think I know anything more about that one.
No, no, it's just poorly maintained, and there are a lot of stones that are down, and it does get mowed though. Okay, Jim.
The next one is Our Lady of the Valley. It's on Salisbury Road. Probably almost all of you have seen it 100 times because it's on the way to the transfer station. It's on the right-hand side. It's not terribly old because the Catholic congregation in Sheffield is not very old. Before this cemetery was established in 1870, there was a corner on the Plain Cemetery on the left-hand side as you look at it from the road. And the Catholics were sort of crammed in there, and you can spot the Catholic burials quite readily because they contain religious symbolism that you never find in the Protestant or congregational cemeteries. But there's Irish names in the Plain Cemetery, and those Irish people were, of course, were Catholic. This is sometimes also called the Catholic Cemetery. It's on land that was once part of the Cosgriff family farm.
Yeah, so Dale Alden chimed in, and he does think that the town maintains the cemetery that's in the back of the Methodist church. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
A photo of Our Lady of the Valley.
Pine Grove Cemetery. It's also called Bow Wow Cemetery because it's on Bow Wow Road. It's called the Curtis Cemetery because at one time it was exclusively Curtis. It is two operations there. One is the original burial ground. It dates from the 1700s. And the newer part is actually, again, a well laid out cemetery where you can find family plots and accessible by roadways. It's dominated by the Curtis family and the Royce family. Beautifully maintained. It has recently undergone restoration of many of the markers. Many of the markers, almost all the markers have been cleaned. And it also has expanded. Acreage has been added to it around the east and southern side. So there's plenty of burial spots left there. A Jewish section has been added. And while it was private until about 4 or 5 years ago, it's now open to the public and a thriving burial site. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Sackett Cemetery, Clayton Road in Ashley Falls. It is an active cemetery, clearly visible from the road. It's recently expanded. The original area is full. It's closed down, but there's a new section. It's not contiguous with the cemetery. It's on 7A near the toward the Connecticut line. And in that cemetery, there is a cenotaph to the Ashley family. They're actually buried in the Barnard Cemetery across from Root Lane in Sheffield. It's open to the public. It has a board of directors, and so they maintain the grounds.
Jim, what is a cenotaph? I've never heard that word before.
A cenotaph is a marker for somebody who is not buried near it. They're buried in another location, either far away. You might even call it a memorial marker. But in the next picture, I think that you're going to show, you can see the cenotaph. It's right, that big monument right in the center. And that was placed there years after the Barnards that are memorialized by it had died. And as I say, they're buried up in the I should have said the Ashleys, who are buried up in the Barnard Cemetery in Sheffield proper.
It's very interesting. So some people could be buried in one cemetery but have a memorial in another one. Interesting.
Not uncommon. It's not uncommon, and there's also a cenotaph in the Pine Grove Cemetery for a person who died in the Revolution as a prisoner of war on a British warship in New York Harbor. Shears Kellogg. It's very close to the Plain Cemetery on Route 7. It is, as they say, as you can see, dominated by the Shears family and the Kellogg family. It's located on land that was originally donated by the Noble family. And the first person that was buried there, excuse me again, was a noble who was married. So you don't see the noble name there, but she's buried in that cemetery. It's also possible that Matthew Noble is buried in it. The more I look at that possibility, the more I think it is likely, because there is a marker in Westfield that is either a burial marker or a cenotaph. And the reason I say that is because on that marker in Westfield, it says died in, oh no, burial unknown. Well, if the burial is unknown, I don't think he was buried in Westfield. Milt Barnum, who some of you knew, claims he saw a marker in that cemetery for Matthew Noble. He and I and about 10 other people spent one afternoon probing and probing and probing, trying to find something that might be buried in the ground that would prove to us that Matthew Noble was buried there, but we were not able to find it. That's it, I think, for that one. Sheffield Plain, it's one of the very oldest in Sheffield. It's in pretty good condition, but the markers are extremely black and moldy, mildew. I'm sure it's because of the shade that the cemetery gets from the high locust trees that are around it. It contains Revolutionary veterans, and it contains families that were some of the earliest to be found in Sheffield. Calendars and let's see, Kellogg's, of course, and Austin's.
Mhm.
It's a very interesting cemetery, and it's well worth a trip if you have any interest in it at all. Um, well, three of the most significant markers there are table markers, and Charlotte is going to say something about table markers.
Yes, there are the two that I just picked up on is Reverend Jonathan Hubbard Sr., and they are flat, but they're raised off of the ground, and they're interesting stones. There's a lot of writing on them, but most of it is illegible due to the fact that, you know, the rain beats on it, the snow beats on it, and it does deteriorate as it goes. The better one is the Reverend John Keep. That one was not too bad. You can read some of it, and then you not able to read all of it. But they are two of the three interesting stones that are in that cemetery. Jim?
Charlotte, I mean, you could could you talk a little bit more about like why would you have a table stone, and also like how big it, you know, how much bigger is it than a normal headstone? What are the differences?
Well, it's a flat, if you want to write an awful lot on a stone, which is really what's happened on both of these, you need a table, you know, a flat table. I would say they're about 6 feet long, don't you think, Jim?
Yes, they're very
Yeah.
large, and there's two
Yeah, they're
slabs.
very large.
There's
And
two large slabs about the same size. One lays flat on the ground, and it has, and then there's the legs that support the top. The legs vary in number. I don't know why, but sometimes there's 4, sometimes there's 5, sometimes there's 6. But it certainly indicates the distinctive position that person held in the community.
right. And it says an awful lot about them, although, and it'll have some passages on it also. So that's usually why people would select that, if they have a lot to say.
They're very expensive, or I should say they were very expensive. And in actual fact, all of the stone markers were expensive at that time. Betty Chapin, who I mentioned earlier, and I, over the years of looking and thinking and answering inquiries, we determined that roughly 50% of the people who were buried in Sheffield no longer have a marker, either because they didn't have one to begin with, or the marker they had was a wooden one that went the way of all things, or their grave was marked with a field stone. And I think that that's true. If you go up to the Brush Hill Cemetery, you find field stones that don't have any markings on them, but just given their location and relationship to the others, I'm led to believe that there are burials beneath them. And I think that's also true in the Hewins Street Cemetery. Spore. If you don't know where it is, you won't find it. It's off of 41, north of the driveway to the Berkshire School on the left, on private property. It's very small. It contains only the Spur family. It's in remarkable condition, given the fact that there's no maintenance, and I can't believe that no trees have ever fallen down on those markers. The people who own the land are very cooperative about going on and looking at it. They're weekenders, so I don't know if you want to go up there without permission or not, but I think if you go over there, you should take a guide with you.
And that's a kind of, oh, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Pardon?
I was going to ask, so what would happen, like, if you bought a piece of land that happened to have a burial ground or a cemetery on it, and you wanted to get rid of it because, you know, you just bought this property? Are there rules or laws or anything that
Yes.
prevents you from doing that, or?
Yes, you cannot move or destroy a cemetery marker. You cannot dig where there might have been human remains. Let's see. You must, however, allow family members access to the site. Now, I'm not related to any of those people, so the landowners could refuse me access to it. But like I say, they're very, very generous about letting people go to see it. The Ward Cemetery, like the Spur Cemetery, is on private land. It is impossible to see from the road and impossible to find, again, unless you know where it is. So be sure if you go there to look for it, take a guide with you. It is on Barnum Street near the junction with Foley Road, and you have to go down a embankment to get it. It's not steep, but it's a downward and upward trek in order to go up and to go down and come up. There's at least one revolutionary veteran in that cemetery, and that's Fellows, Captain John Fellows, not to be confused with General John Fellows. I suspect they're related, if not father and son, because the general lived in a large mansion right near this cemetery that's on the National Registry of Historic Places. It's his private residence now.
Now it's my turn. I'll give Jim a little bit of rest here. What you're looking at is a Find a Grave screen. If you log on to findagrave.com, this is the first screen you're going to see. Now, Find a Grave is a large database devoted to cemeteries and those who have died. It was developed by Jim Tipton in 1995 to house his photograph collection of tombstones of famous people. From there, it evolved as the interest grew to include all individuals who had died. The vast majority of photos and information on memorials is provided by unpaid volunteers who just have a hobby of liking to get out into cemeteries and record this information. Now, the program was subsequently sold to Ancestry.com in 2013, and Jim Tipton is listed as an editor. Now, as you look at the 4 tabs adjacent to the Find a Grave logo, you'll see it says Memorials, Cemeteries, Famous, and Contribute. Starting with cemeteries, I like to start there first. The cemeteries that are in this database are over 500,000 in 243 countries. And I'm sure it's much bigger than that now. When you look at the memorials area, that is over 218 million records are in there by cemetery, by state, by country. And all of that information that is in there has been input by volunteers. Now, the memorial information on the next screen, if we can go there. Okay, this is what it looks like, and you've been looking at it from other sources that we have showed you. And you can put in there the birth, the death information, the burial information. You can add family members. Now, I find that that's a very big contribution to the overall program, because you can look at Matthew Noble Sr. there, and you can even see his parents. And it's people have just looked up this kind of information and just filled it on out. You can add photos. You can request a photo. Say someone who is related to Matthew Noble asked you to photograph something for them at that cemetery. You can do that, and it goes back to them, and they have some record of where Matthew was born. They're not quite sure in his case where he died or where he was buried, but you have a start and you have a finish. And if you're working on genealogy projects, all that stuff in the middle, you can work on. At least you know where you're going to start and where you're going to finish. And the next thing you see, famous, well, since Jim Tipton started it with famous burials, other people have added as it goes along. Now, you can submit someone for famous, but it's up to the Ancestry and Find a Grave people to determine whether they're famous enough that they'll get that ruling. Now, where you see contribute is not money. Okay, contribute is whether you're willing to be a volunteer, where you would maybe take pictures in cemeteries, that you would be willing to photograph requests for other people in different locations. And so if you do want to do anything like add any information to a particular stone, say for instance, someone wants to add information to Matthew Noble, they make that request, but they can't just change it. They have to register, and they have to, they're being checked to see that they have a bona fide email address. And then they still cannot do it until it goes to the person who created the record originally. They have a final say of saying whether they'll accept it or decline it. But usually most people will accept, especially if it is someone they know, and you can verify it. I don't verify every little thing because I'm taking a lot of pictures. I don't even know the people. So consequently, when somebody tells me that they are a relative and this is what his middle name was, or this is where he lived at one point, well, I'll allow that to go in. Now, another nice thing, you know, if you look to the right where you see explore more information, you can click on one of those searches and you're going to go right into Ancestry.com. So it is a well thought out program, and I find it very helpful in finding information on birth and death. Next screen, please. Okay, now this is me. You're looking at my profile page. Everybody who contributes information must register, and you're giving a profile page. Now, I've done a small bio of what I do. Now, you notice where it says contributions. They keep track of what I do. So I can go out there and I can see what I've done. Now you'll see that I've added about 4,603 memorials, and I'm actually managing 4,500. Well, that's not my real interest, to be able to manage a huge database. My interest lies in photographing the tombstones, and especially those that nobody has done. I do respond to requests that are received to Ancestry, and they funnel them out to me of ones that are within a 50-mile radius of where I live. And I've done 279 there. But as far as the photos that I have added, I've added just under 13,000 now. And I have 2 fame ratings, and I have 1 sponsorship. And you'll notice that that I have been doing this for 6 years and 7 months. Well, I was even doing it before Ancestry picked it up. And you'll see that number 48371,353. Well, I'm in the 48 million section of people who do this. So you have a lot of people out there doing this all over the world. And I take my camera wherever I go, especially if I'm in a new place. I've taken pictures in London. I've gone to Normandy. I've been in other parts of France. My husband family was from Ireland. I've taken photographs from there, and I've posted them. So it's a fun type thing, and it's a great exercise, especially when the weather is good. And I enjoy it very much.
Charlotte, I have a question. So, I've been to some cemeteries, and sometimes it's so hard to even just be able to see what the inscription is. Are there certain things that you do to, if you have permission to
yes,
stop the stone yeah.
Yeah, I always take a whisk broom. That's my first thing. There's a lot of loose stuff on stones. You'll, if the place was recently mowed, well, the shavings from the grasses falls up on them. So I use a whisk broom. I also use a brush if I want to just brush over it a little bit to get other stuff off. And I'll see what I can see. Now, here in Sheffield, if I find that I can't see it too much, mainly because the sun is in the wrong place, it's shaded, I can always go back, and many times I will do that. And I've had people go with me and hold a flashlight and trying to figure out what it says. Now, basically what I'd like to do is at least find out who it is and any kind of information, so I at least identify that this is the person I'm looking for. Have we lost our video?
Yeah, I'm gonna switch into the website so we can kind of play around in real time on Find a Grave. I'm not sure if you guys are seeing that yet, but hold on one second.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
I wanted just to mention a technique that will help you read the fading carving. If you take ordinary white flour and rub it on the stone, and then rub it so that the flour is really only in the crevices that you're trying to read, it will improve the visibility of the carving immensely, and it does no harm to the stone to do that.
Yeah, so that's basically what I just try to figure it out the best I can. Some you're just never going to get. And sometimes I'll say, okay, does it look like it's a family section and that there are other people with the same last name right in that area? And then I look at a record that somebody might have put up on Find a Grave, but there's no photo, to see if if there is a name there that somebody is buried at that cemetery. And I think, well, maybe that's the person. And I might take the photo of it, but I don't put a photo up unless I'm sure that that is the person, because, you know, you don't do something that leads somebody astray, because the moment they see a photo, they expect it to be the one of their ancestors. So even with dates, they say that if they always, many of the stones carry the burial date, the date they died, but not the date that they were born with. And Find a Grave frowns on us just figuring, even though it says, oh, he was 86 years old, but they don't want us to do that. If we can't just say that this was his birthday, they do not want us to, you know, kind of judge. Now, we can put an approximate, but we, you know, we don't put a date, an actual date, because they frowned on that. They're trying to keep the database as correct as possible, because people are going to be using this to add to their genealogy program. Now, another thing I like to point out, this is not a genealogy program. It is Find a Grave. And sometimes people get a little bit elaborate with what they might want to put on there, and that's also frowned upon. Any questions?
So right now, we're in the website of Find a Grave. I picked one of the more famous people from Sheffield. And you can see, you see some of the other ones that vary so much, you know, because he's a somewhat famous person. He has a lot more information on that site than, you know, the average Joe would.
Yes, and he is the brother to our porter, that Barnard, who is in the chapel, Frederick Augustus Porter Barnard. He is their brothers.
So what I find is kind of interesting is there's different ways that you can look up somebody. You could look it up just on the cemetery, and you would put, you know, the location, and then you could just browse the different names. And that's especially helpful when you're not quite sure what the spelling of the last name is, because things varied. But you can also look up by just looking up the person.
That's right. But you want to, I always go into cemeteries first, because when you're doing names and you've got a database of 218 million, you're going to get a lot of the same names. It's best if you can kind of get into an area where they died, or or were born. And I always go to Sheffield, Berkshire County. And if I'm looking for somebody in Sheffield, I'll do a search up there, and it'll bring up all the cemeteries. You need to go up further.
Oh, up a little bit. Yeah.
Where it says search. Keep going. Oh, okay. See that search?
Yeah. Oh, right here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So what should I type in, Charlotte?
No, you're going to just type search right here. See the search?
Oh, okay. There we go.
Okay. Just send search. Okay. That brings up all the cemeteries in Sheffield, especially if you know it is Sheffield. So I always go by town. And if I'm desperate and I don't know the town, I'll do the county, if I do know a county, but then, you're making it bigger and bigger, but that's usually where I start. I use the township, and there they were all listed. And if you're looking for anybody in Sheffield, well, there's not that many cemeteries there that you can go through and see if you can come up with the name.
It's kind of interesting, Jim and Charlotte, smallpox gravesite. Is that something that you've encountered before? Why would he have his own gravesite just because he had smallpox?
Well, from what I understand, when he died, he died of the smallpox.
Mm-hmm.
And the town would not allow him to come into town because they were so paranoid that it would spread the disease, that he could not be buried into any one of the cemeteries. So they buried him, I believe, along the side of the road. Now, Jim, do you know where that location is?
It was on West Sheffield Road near the Wyandotte Country Club, but in Sheffield.
Yeah, okay. And I believe his wife got buried there also, right?
Not to my knowledge.
Oh, not to your knowledge, okay. Okay.
Yeah, we just wanted to point out that I believe Dennis Sears might have some information about the Buckingham family plot. I believe it's on his property. So in the Q&A, definitely, Dennis, chime in and let us know what it's like to have that there on your land.
Well, we actually have Worcester Buckingham buried on our property. We didn't know that when we bought the property, but we soon found out. We had a map that showed there was a burial plot, and I wandered around and found it eventually. And there's a picture of it. It looks like. Is that yeah?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah. Oh yeah, it has a memorial plaque. Worcester was a very unusual gentleman in that he was a rarity in that he was both a World War I and a World War II veteran. And if you just think of the timing of the thing, that there weren't that many people that were in World War I that then became officers in World War II. So I've never really dug into his history and so forth, but it's very unusual. And as you can see, the flag, the kids that come around and put the flags up every year, they put a new flag right there on Worcester's grave.
So Dale Alden mentioned that the American Legion, the Sheffield American Legion Post 340, they will provide the proper ways to memorialize veterans. So if you have a loved one or even a friend who recently passed who is a veteran, definitely get in touch with them because they will give you a marker and a flag to make sure that they are commemorated properly. And it's very interesting that Sheffield has veterans who go back, I believe, even to the French and Indian War. So there is a long tradition of service in this town that continues to today.
Excuse me, Charlotte.
Yes.
I was told, or I think I even saw it, I'm not sure, in the Barnard Cemetery. There was a story about two boys who died because they had gotten into mischief. And that was in the early 1800s, I believe. And then in the 1900s, a story came out somewhere that was wrong. They had not been naughty and that they died of something else. Do you know about that?
No, that's, do you know any name?
No, but when you're facing the cemetery with Route 7 in back of you, to the right, and the stones are pretty old, so I think it's...
I know that marker, and I might be able to help you with an answer as to what it means.
Oh, good.
Few and evil were our days, is what it says. It's from the Bible. I cannot quote the chapter and verse. My nephew quoted it to me one day when I took him over to show it to him.
Uh,
It's the belief among Christians that all days are evil until the second coming of Christ.
mhm, mhm.
Ah,
So anybody could have had that put on their marker.
Do you think that people who were not evil would want that on their marker?
Do I what?
Do you think that anybody who is not naughty would have had that on their gravestone?
Well, it was probably put on at a time when people knew what it meant
You
because they
think?
read the Bible.
Okay, okay. Well, the story that I read was saying that indeed that the boys had been thought to be naughty. Maybe
Yeah,
they
they
misconstrued.
not.
We don't know because they're all dead and gone. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that I have some written history on the Barnard Cemetery. The house that I own, I believe, was owned by the Barnards. So if you would like, I can show you, I can give you copies of the information that I have.
More than like.
You know,
We'd be very happy and to have it and very disappointed if we didn't get it.
and where would I find you?
I can come to your house. I don't know if you wanted to come to our research library, you could do that. Or you could mail it,
Well,
whatever suits you.
the cemetery is my neighbor,
Yes, I know exactly where you live.
right? So if you want to wear a mask and come to my house, that would be fine.
Okay.
Let me just think. There was something else I wanted to tell you. Do you remember an antique shop on Route 7? It was going south. It was after Route Lane on the right-hand side, and I believe it was called the 1850 House.
That's right.
So have you been in there? Do you know about the entrance to the Underground Railroad?
Well, I've been in the house. Of course, it's been many years. I never got beyond the first floor. I've never heard any story about that being connected to the Underground Railroad.
Well,
And
I was an antique dealer and an antiques dealer, and the people showed me. They opened up the closet and showed me the entrance, and it was very small. I remember that.
that's interesting. And I can't say that it is true or is not true. There's some slight evidence of the Underground Railroad operating in this area, but nothing conclusive. It's thought generally that the Underground Railroad in this area was farther east in the Beckett area.
Mm-hmm.
But because it was illegal what they were doing, nobody kept records.
Right.
It's just like during the Revolution in Sheffield, nobody wrote anything down because they were afraid of if it fell into the wrong hands, they were in trouble.
Well, wouldn't it be interesting to have somebody, I know the owner, at least the son of the owner, I think he still has possession of the property.
I think he does.
It would be interesting to actually go in and investigate that opening.
Mhm. I've not heard that story. There's one about Bow Wow Road. The house is no longer there. It was moved to Egremont. That had a secret room, and I've seen that so-called secret room. I am just as sure that it was for forging currency as it was part of the Underground Railroad.
That's interesting. Yeah, this doesn't, from what I remember, it just looks like it looks like an entrance to something, but not a room. It's on the first floor, and as I said, it's small. but I understood that a lot of the people at that time were not as large as we are today. I don't know if
This
any
is
of
very true. I can tell you that for sure.
sorry, what did you say?
I can tell you that for sure.
So I just want to jump in. Anybody who would like to unmute themselves and put their camera back on, we're going to start the Q&A section. We've already started it. So feel free if you'd like to unmute yourself and put your video on and start asking questions. The way we'll do it is, if people want to raise their hands, I'll call on you, just so we can keep it orderly. But anyone with a question?
Okay, I'm going to bow out, and James, I'll get in touch with you.
Say again, please.
I said I'm bowing out now, but I want to be able to get in touch with you.
Okay.
So you're in the phone book?
Yes.
Okay, I'll call you and then we'll talk. All right?
Okay.
Okay. Bye now.
Thanks.
Muting.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Mhm.
Thank you very much for tonight, by the way. This is my first event, and I learned a lot. That flower trick is something I really look forward to using as well. I have a question about the Underground Railroad. And my question is conceptually the way we think of the Underground Railroad. We think, 40s, 50s, 19th century, but was there like an Underground Railroad earlier, like the fact that Massachusetts had freedom before New York and Connecticut? I mean, could we be thinking along the Underground Railroad in that era as well?
I didn't follow I'm sorry, I didn't follow your question very closely.
Sure. So my question is the Underground Railroad, right? We always think of the 1830s, 40s, 50s as Underground Railroad, but was there a movement of black folk into Massachusetts when New York still had slavery and when Connecticut still had slavery?
Yes, there definitely was.
Is that considered the Underground Railroad as well?
I don't think so. Not when I think of the Underground Railroad, I have certain notions and ideas, but the people who came, I think some of the earliest settlers in Sheffield, other than the native Indians, were black people that came over the mountain, as they say. They came over the mountain from the Hudson River Valley, where slavery existed until I think 1823 or 1825, 50 years longer than it was legal in Massachusetts. So it isn't that they went from one place to another under the guidance of guides and that sort of thing. In my thinking, they slipped away, either families or small groups came over the mountain and they settled over here. Sometimes there were raids from New York State, not only to recover the slaves, but also the border was in dispute for a long time. I don't remember exactly when it was settled, but it was in dispute. So the New York at one time claimed Massachusetts all the way to the Connecticut River.
So what is the earliest evidence you have of a black grave?
Of what?
A grave of a black person.
Well, I think, Charlotte, do you have something about a black buried in the Candy Sage?
No, I thought it was, but I realized that it was the wrong person. It
Okay.
wasn't that. So no, I did not. The one that I was looking at when I started to check it a little more closely, I realized that that the early census showed freed men but it wasn't, you know, like it turned out to be free white men.
Oh,
And I had gotten that confused. And then when I first had talked to Jennifer about it, and then as I started really looking into it, I realized that no, it was not a Black person at all.
Ronan, I would have to do some research. We definitely have records of Black people dying in Sheffield at early dates, but I don't know, have it in my head.
Okay, thank you, Jim. I appreciate it.
Any other questions? Well, I have one. So I know that marble was produced in this area quite a bit. Are most of the cemetery stones made out of marble, or, you know, what are, you know, can you speak anything to the different types of materials and different types of stones that might have been used at different periods?
Well, the most frequent marker you see is made of marble. The vast majority of them are marble. Some of them are slate. I don't know of any slate that was produced locally, so I believe that the slate had to be imported and therefore probably belonged only on the markers of fairly well-to-do. There are 2 or 3 redstone markers in Sheffield, one in Barnard, one in 2 in Barnard, one in Pine Grove, and I had to consult with an archaeologist on that one from Williams College. He said it probably or most likely came from the Connecticut River Valley.
Very interesting. Any
There's
more?
also, I think, some markers that are made of what's called schist, which is really, because it fractures rather fairly flatly. It's hard to work with. It's just what the mountains in the to the west of us are basically made of. But you don't see a whole lot of schist.
Very interesting. Any more questions before we wrap up? Okay, well, I'd like to thank Charlotte and Jim for a really cool presentation. We're going to be putting this PowerPoint up on our website, but also the video can be watched at any time, as well as any of our other videos on our website, because we did record it today. So if you have somebody who couldn't make it tonight and wanted to watch it, just tell them to go to our website, and it'll be pretty obvious where to find it. So again, thank you, Jim, and thank you, Charlotte.
Now I can ask. I have a question for Tammy.
Mm-hmm.
Who mows the Owens Street Cemetery?
The town of Sheffield.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Sheffield mows all of the cemeteries except for the active cemeteries and the Kellogg Cemetery, which their family maintains.
Does this mean I should, Tammy, does this mean I could ask the town to like mow my field and then could we arrange that, you think, huh?
I'd have to ask your wife about that, Dennis.
I'd go for it, try for it. All I can say is no.
Before we all part, could I ask or just have a brief comment with Jim Miller once? Going back to the question about people of color coming over from New York, a elderly Black gentleman who is no longer alive told me once, who was a Sheffield resident, told me once that actually his family were slaves of the Dutch, and that his family had come over, at first from the Dutch, got recaptured, okay, by the English after the English threw the Dutch out, and then came back a second time. So, and who knows?
Nice. So if there's no other questions, I guess we can wrap up for the night. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend, and keep an eye out for future programs. The next one will be on December 11th.
Great job. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you,
Really enjoyed it.
Same.
Yeah, great job.
Yes, great presentation. Thank you.
Did a great job. Thanks again.